All right, welcome back. It's 3 o'clock, so it's time for our next session. We're excited to see you all logging back on. If you have any issues, just refresh your feed and it'll help you out. And as a reminder, for those of you who are new, you have question and answer boxes to chat with us, to drop in questions. You can do polls and you can chat in the community chat thread as we go through this session. This next session is to talk about those public spaces. We've been building up to it through the past couple sessions, and now we're going to talk about public spaces and gathering places. And we have two very different projects, but both of them touch on some really important elements of this topic. So today, we want to talk about how there's resources, examples of successful projects. There's toolkits available, and these have been created. We're looking at Indiana with Daniel Walker and Iowa with Jennifer Drinkwater to showcase their projects around both formal and informal public gathering places. Daniel, if you'll take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, so hi, I'm Dan Walker. I'm going to be presenting on behalf of the Enhancing the Value of Public Spaces, Creating Healthy Communities program team. Our team of facilitators includes Kara Salazar, Blake Conley, Lisa Graves, and Dr. Michael Wilcox. The program started before my time here at Purdue, actually, so going on 6 years ago. It was initially created, and then I was brought on, and we created a partnership with a couple of other specialists in the Health and Human Sciences Extension to add in the health component. So we wanted to look at public spaces as a place where we could create opportunities for active living and healthy eating, and also achieve those two things through placemaking. So that's going to be kind of the gist of my talk. I'd like to introduce you to the program and then get into a couple examples of the projects that we've done throughout rural communities in Indiana. So I want to start with the end in mind, and what are the applications of the EVPS CHC program, as we like to call it. It just rolls off the tongue for me now. The outcomes can be comprehensive plan updates, 5-year parks and recreation master plan submissions, downtown revitalization projects, and preparations for a specific grant related to a specific project or place in the community. And so the two examples I'm going to look at today are one of the 5-year parks and recreation master plans, and also the downtown revitalization project. But I would like to throw in that the downtown revitalization project had a spinoff, which was a comprehensive plan update, which I worked on, but I'll get to that when the time comes. We frame all of the projects we do or all of the community development projects that we do through Purdue Extension here that I'm involved with, through the community capitals. And it's really a great way to have the community investigate what sort of perspectives it has related to the assets in the community. So the community capitals here include political, built, natural, human, social, cultural, and financial. And so when we're going through the workshop series to understand our public spaces, we want to look at them from a built capital perspective. What are the buildings we have? What's the built environment like? What's the natural environment like? What are the assets? Are people coming for the trees? Are they coming for the water? Why are they there? And social, cultural, financial, political, and human, et cetera. We sort of repeat that process as we look toward the different assets in our public spaces. So we've merged the community capitals with the policy systems and environment framework that our colleagues in HHS have brought to us. And that's looking at what sort of changes we can make in in our communities rather, and at what level to achieve healthier outcomes and more active living in the community. So we have the policy level, which is written statements, organizational level change. They might include laws or ordinances, systems level changes, which is one step sort of down, changes in organizations, procedures, and processes, and then finally environmental change. What changes to the environment can we make in the natural environment as well? So we've merged these two frameworks, and we put a spin on it through appreciative inquiry, which is the third thing I'll talk about. And this is what frames our public engagement process in the EVPS CHC program. We start out with define and discover, which when we have our initial group, and I'll get into the meeting process, looking at what are the assets again in the community, and then to the dream phase where we're looking at what's the ideal for our public spaces in the future, and then design and delivery where we get into what are we going to actually do and how are we going to make it happen. So that's kind of the appreciative inquiry process that we use. So the meeting series itself, the scoping session is probably one of the most important sessions that we have. This is when we're introducing ourselves to the community stakeholder group, the community steering committee. So through Purdue Extension, oftentimes we go out to different counties and we work with extension educators in those counties to do projects through this program. And so getting an idea of who the local leadership is, what is their capacity to implement the outcomes of the process, and also to scope the process itself. So what are we going to be looking at? What are we going to be working on? Even to the point of looking at forming agendas, determining budgets, and looking at the venues and signing up people to come to the program. So that meeting really gives us a sense of what we have to do. What's the project going to be? Who's going to own it in the end? And how do we get there? So we scope out session one in that meeting, and that's looking at all of the assets in the community that we can think of. You see the community capital headers across the sticky wall here and all the different assets that this particular community came up with. This one is where we also use the World Cafe style of facilitation to have people go through each one of the community capitals will have its own table where people can rotate through and provide their input in terms of the assets for each one of those capitals at a different table. We have several rotations, and it's a very active, engaging process where people get up and think about the public spaces and all the different characteristics within them. We do provide quite a bit of information with the program. We've developed some complementary videos, and we always provide a community data snapshot, which goes over the demographics of the community and current trends. We discuss the county health rankings to give that perspective. And then we move into the opportunities phase, actually in the same meeting, where we move on to what the community might like to see in the public space. And typically these are 3-hour meetings of about 30 to 50 people. In session two, we take those opportunities and some of the ideas around those, and through facilitation processes, we come out with a couple objectives and strategies that they want to work on. And in the second meeting, we look at using the impact effort grid to help them prioritize the different objectives and strategies that they want to work on for the public spaces. And they fall into 4 buckets: the easy major, easy minor, difficult major, difficult minor. And we use this to kind of scope out what's the timeline going to be. So what short, fast wins can we have? What projects can we do for a small amount of money and a short amount of time? It's kind of the lighter, quicker, cheaper methodology that you've seen in some placemaking projects. After this meeting, we get into an even more in-depth meeting. And as we go in more depth, we have smaller numbers of people in the meeting. So it's not that we're saying no more people can come. It's that the steering committee usually takes the reins in a more aggressive manner in the smaller meetings. And people from the larger meeting, that first meeting, are more than welcome to attend. It's just that this is the group that's really going to own the process after the initial engagement. So in this meeting, we're looking at developing an action schedule. And that's going to include timelines, roles, responsibilities, funding sources, indicators of success. So we're getting into a little bit of evaluation and monitoring there, looking at how are we going to collect data about about the success of the space or the failure of the space or whatever. Who's going to collect that information, and then what sorts of communication need to happen with the community about what we're doing in this project. And so developing the communication plan is the final step for the meeting series. And once all of these meetings are concluded, we take all of the information that we've gathered. A lot of times we'll also do a companion community survey so that we get input from those people who could not make it to the meeting. And we build that into the meeting process. And we also combine it with all of the information that we get from the in-person into the final report, which includes the action plan, all of the community characteristic data, and all of the notes and things about the process overall end up in that final action plan. So the program has been applied in many rural communities throughout Indiana. This is your Indiana geography lesson here. Indianapolis is right there in the middle. And then all the stars represent those communities that we've done the project in over the last couple of years. We've done it in a community as small as 860 people in Gaston to a community as large as 60,000 in Terre Haute, with Connersville downtown. Geography-wise, we've done it as small as 18 blocks and as large as 483 square miles for the county of Putnam County there. So that's a general overview of the scope in terms of the size of communities we've worked in and also the geographies. Connersville and Putnam County will be the two examples that I discuss here. So what we ask when we're doing, when we run the program, we usually have an active living group, we usually have a healthy eating group, and we also have a placemaking group. And what we ask of the placemaking group is to look at the question of how do we employ our community's assets to enhance public spaces, meaning our parks, trails, plazas, markets, etc., so that people use them to elevate the quality of life. And Putnam County, they had a placemaking working group inside of their effort to create a 5-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And Connersville, Indiana had one in that downtown focus group or downtown project focus program. And so here's the Connersville area outlined in that pink box, about 18 square blocks in the downtown of Connersville. To give you an idea of what comes out of the placemaking group, working groups through the EPPS process, we see the community capitals here: political, financial, cultural, built, natural, human, and social. And then underneath each one, we have the assets that support placemaking that particular project brainstorming group came up with. So in this example, I'd like to focus on the cultural, because this was in Putnam County. Putnam County has DePaul University in the community of Greencastle, which is the county seat there. And apparently there's a great music program there, and they send out violins to all 4th graders or something like that. I can't remember the exact detail there. But, you know, performance art is very strong in the community. And so they listed a lot of art assets under cultural, so Music Fest, School of Music there, Trail Art, Arts Council, Public Art, etc., as assets to support placemaking in their 5-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And so if we look at the opportunities they came up with, we see a lot of trail expansion, development, and enhancement of trails, volunteerism. The Parks Foundation is a financial opportunity there to have them help fund things. Under cultural, we see program developments, trail enhancements, arts, festivals, collaboration, inclusion. And so over the 3-meeting series, all this came out of the first meeting. And then the second meeting, we developed the objectives and strategies. And what we see here is merging the arts and culture into the park system, which is a really cool, and it may not be unique, but I think it's really cool. And the strategy there is to use educational opportunities to make musical instruments and sounds made in nature. So if you can imagine, somehow they plan to integrate the music program that they have with the trails program or in their natural public spaces to create a sense of place there. And just to give you an example of a general other sort of objective that came out for this project was green initiatives in general. And then one strategy there would be to use municipal wellfield protection areas as county park space for prairie and pollinator areas and walking trails. So making more a natural environment in the public space there. So the overall project outcomes, and I know this is short just because we both have a short amount of time here, but they were able to, so they used the action plan and the report that I spoke about that compiles all the input and that they receive over the project timeline. And they put that together with their own set of additional objectives and information to do a timely submission for the 5-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan, because they had a new Parks Board that just formed. And so now they have a Parks Plan. They submit that to the IDNR for funding, the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. And that decision is currently under review, whether or not they're going to be funded or not. But they have a very strong engagement side to their submission to the IDNR for their parks plan. And over the whole program, virtual also, we did a virtual survey, and we had a couple virtual versions of the in-person meeting that you saw pictures of earlier. Overall, we received feedback from 839 people in the community, and 113 of those came to our workshops. It could have been the same person a couple times, but they were overall engaged at a very high level throughout this project. And the project partner here was very strong. So that just goes to show. So placemaking in Connersville, this is a different take. It's the 18 block take. They went through the same meeting series, so you can imagine them doing the assets and opportunities the same way. But it's a community of 13,000. It's identified as the least healthy county in Indiana by the county health rankings, at least at this time. And they were focused on their downtown because like most smaller communities in Indiana, the downtown has seen some disinvestment over the years. The project partners on this were huge as well. We had Becky Marvu, who was an educator through Extension, community wellness educator, and Discover Connersville, which was a huge community partner there. They run the gamut from business to tourism to downtown development, so they were a great partner to have on board. And those two had such a dynamic synergy that a lot of the results that you see that I'm going to show today are accredited to those two organizations and those people. So we engaged with 92 people over 14 hours of in-person workshops, and there were 2 follow-on projects. And I'll kind of discuss those as I get a chance here. So if you can imagine this as a place to be made, if you will, and that's what they did. So in the assets, they brainstormed about the community. They identified some missing teeth in the downtown storefronts or downtown streetscape as opportunities. And so this was one of the opportunities, and they came up with the name, the Oasis, for this place. And what they wanted to do to enhance healthy eating and also create a great downtown public space was to do a community garden here. But they've done so much more than that. And here's some of the comments that I just pulled off their Facebook. It's so cool. I was there for a while. It was fun watching the kids, planting lettuce and green onion sets. How cool is that? It's a wonderful addition. And then one of the more touching parts is some kind soul left these children's coats hanging on the fence at the Oasis. If your child is in need of one, please feel free to take it in. And thank you to the donor. So that kind of gives me goosebumps thinking about how a public space can be so much more than just a place you think of and drive by. Here's the community doing the ribbon cutting. And that's kind of what they made out of the place. Here's some more pictures of it after the project was done. So getting into the planner mode, you see the 2 walls on the side. So it had 2 walls of a room. If we think of a placemaking as an outdoor room, they added in a nice wooden fence in the back against the alley, and they added in a nice metal fence in the front to create the 4 walls there. But then they added the green space. They added the garden, the benches, the flowers, the little library, the signage, all of these elements of placemaking that you see touted so much across the literature and all the projects. And then they have the programming there with the literacy in the garden. I was thinking of lighter, quicker, cheaper when I saw this greenhouse they made out of old windows and an old door. And then you have the mayor there just enjoying the time doing some activities. So the programming side is very strong due to the involvement of the community partners here. I just put some stars because I like to put stars on PowerPoints, I guess, but here's the project for public spaces, their placemaking wheel of all the different characteristics that make a great place. And I just went through and brainstormed about this place and how many of the different spokes of that wheel that it checks off. And there's quite a few, almost all of them actually, if I really think about it in some way. The other spin-off project was a focus on another park that's just slightly outside the boundary. This project was done in concert with the Department of Landscape Architecture. They brought students in, they brought members of the community to campus to see the presentation of the space. And eventually it's going to look something like this as they exceeded their fundraising goal for that space too. So a great win for them. And finally, the lessons learned here. This is what I got a feel of as a result of doing a project in Connersville. People know what should and can make a place for their community, but a catalyst is usually needed. In this case, the catalyst was the Enhancing the Value of Public Spaces program. But once in motion, the elements of the placemaking tend to take care of themselves. So once we turn it over to the people, they do the rest. I mean, you see the decorations. They even found a way to have fun in wintertime in Indiana there. But in some way, decisions about place have to be turned over to the people to allow that to happen, it's critical to maximize the potential within the social, human, and cultural capital in the community. So with that, thanks for joining me, and I'll turn it back over to Jennifer for her presentation.
Great, thanks, Daniel. That was awesome. Share my screen. And all right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Drinkwater. I'm an artist, and I am currently the community art specialist for Iowa State Extension and Outreach. What does that mean? I get asked that a lot. In a nutshell, I work with Iowa communities to use art for community and economic development. And as an artist, I've always been interested in how art impacts us once it leaves the studio walls. How can it bring folks in a community together? How can it be used as a strategy to create inclusion, promote opportunities for informal leadership development, and increase quality of life? The how matters. So today I'm going to share with you 4 themes that I've noticed present in really effective and inclusive placemaking efforts. I try to keep these top of mind when I do any kind of creative community artwork. They're kind of like an insurance policy that I don't get swept away in the aesthetic or output of a project, but I stay grounded in the process. So I'm going to go over each theme and give you a quick example of what this may look like, and then I'm going to end with some tips and resources for you that may be useful for you in your community. All right, so the 4 themes, the 4 corners. Belonging is crucial. Work with what you've got. Art reflects us and connects us. And the how matters. So what do these mean? I'm going to start with belonging is crucial. A lot has been written over the years about art and economic development, how art can encourage folks to move to our communities and visit our communities. But in my opinion, the impacts of art is more important for the folks who already live and work in these places. Like I said, I work for Iowa State Extension and Outreach, and I'm really grateful to learn so much from sociologists and planners and designers, being a painter by trade, especially about community development. Since 1994, Iowa State University has connected with 99 small towns, and they define it here as less than 10,000 residents, and through the Iowa Small Town Poll. And this poll strives to understand what conditions create and sustain high quality of life in small communities. And the findings have been remarkable. A surprising trend shows that the income level and industry has less to do with quality of life. And according to this 25-year study, 2 of the things that seem to matter more are high levels of local civic engagement and a strong sense of community belonging. So jackpot. Art initiatives, in my opinion, can completely and totally provide opportunities for local civic engagement and provide folks with a sense of belonging. Much of this is intuitive. I'm going to do a little belonging experiment for just a quick sec. I want you to imagine spending time with a person who's a good friend or a colleague, somebody that you can completely be yourself around. That person remembers your stories, they light up when you enter a room, and they invite you places. How do you feel, and how would you act spending time around that friend? You probably feel pretty good. You probably feel confident and supportive, like you could try new things, you could take some risks in your life, you'd be your best self. Now, I want you to switch gears and imagine spending time with somebody who you don't think likes you very much. Maybe they ignore you, or they roll their eyes at you, or they interrupt you all the time or ask you way too many questions. How would you feel, and how would you act? I know I would probably shut down. I'd get really quiet. I'd feel super insecure, maybe want to punch that person. I feel like communities and places can affect us in the same way. They can make us feel supported or unsupported. Warm and fuzzy like this building, or cold and alienated like a concrete jungle. And some of the ways that we may feel unsupported where we live are not seeing ourselves represented in community leadership or community initiatives, not recognizing our stories in a public place, or our histories, or even our languages anywhere. So how do we get more deliberate in creating belonging? Let's look at the research. So this kind of builds on what Daniel was talking about. A fancy term for belonging is social capital. And there's 2 types of social capital I want to point out today. There's bonding and bridging. Bonding occurs between folks who have a lot in common. So people who are a member of a family or a place of worship or a cultural group, they feel close and connected because they have shared interests, a shared sense of identity, values, and histories. The us game is real strong with bonding capital. And the shadow side of us can create a them. And it's really common to have a lot of bonding capital in small communities and small organizations. So much so that newcomers who come to town or come to an organization can always be outsiders, even if they've lived in a place for 20 years. On the other side of it, bridging social capital connects folks that don't have a lot in common. So people with diverse backgrounds. Bridging is more grounded in purpose and goals, and it can result in collective action and really create forward momentum in a community. We love bridging, the more the better. So the goal here in any placemaking effort is to strive to create more bridging in your community. And how do we do this? So according to some research, bridging can be increased by regular face-to-face positive interactions. So as you delve into public places and gathering spaces in your community, I would encourage you to create opportunities for folks to get together on the regular and have a good time. And as you think about keep belonging and bridging in mind, you want to work with what you've got in your community and try not to be like every other place out there. So this harkens to asset-based community development, which is what I first started learning about when I started working with an extension several years ago as an artist. I really felt connected to the philosophy of asset-based community development because you focus on what you've got and you're not on the deficits that you don't have. And I tend to be a cynic. So this really kind of opened my eyes and rang true to me. I grew up in Mississippi and I've lived in Iowa for a really long time. And in both states, I spend a lot of time driving around and listening to other people's stories, which is really like the best part of my job. And each new community that I visit, I inevitably meet somebody or hear about somebody who's doing some really creative thing to make their community a better place. These folks are scrappy. They're pulling together resources and assets and talents that's ground up and locally impactful. So in light of all this, I started something called the What's Good Project to celebrate their stories. So I ask folks what's good, the assets, about where they live, and I create paintings based on these conversations. The stories and paintings ideally give a digital platform to what's already happening in rural Iowa and Mississippi. So a quick example. In late 2019, I interviewed Benjamin Salisbury, who is the Public Engagement and Museum Education Director of the Emmett Till Interpretive Center in Sumner, Mississippi. And this conversation and the work of the center inspired a series of paintings for the What's Good Project. If you're not familiar with who Emmett Till is, he was a 14-year-old Black boy who was brutally murdered in 1955 by a handful of white men outside of Sumner, Mississippi. I need to mention here that the paintings that I created are not about Emmett Till's personal story. They're more focused on the work that the center is doing locally and nationally. Since the 90s, the Emmett Till Commission and Center has hosted local racial reconciliation conversations, as well as exhibits, readings, and other creative projects geared toward telling the story of Emmett Till and pointing a way toward racial healing. Mr. Salisbury says, and I quote, in the past few years, we've been able to host summer fellowship programs where local youth use photo documentaries as their medium for storytelling, while also learning a little bit more about the civil rights movement. More specifically, the fact that the civil rights movement wasn't just Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and some of the other folks that made history books, that the civil rights movement was quote unquote regular folk, Black and white, that worked together and fought the system. The Emmett Till Interpretive Center is using their space and resources to provide opportunities for young people to use their creative voice to understand their histories and chart their future. And if you're not familiar with the center, I would really encourage you to check them out online. They're doing really great work. The third theme is art reflects us and art connects us. And this is my answer to people who say they don't know anything about art, which I hear a lot. That's all you need to remember. Art is a reflection of us culturally. It shows us what we value as a person or a place or a community, and it reflects who we all are. And place-based productions is an excellent example of an organization that's deliberate about community reflection and connection. So if you've not heard of place-based production, they are the brainchild, or it is the brainchild of two Minnesota theater makers, Ashley Hansen and Andrew Gaylord. They both wanted to figure out a way to use theater as a strategy to assist rural Minnesota communities. Place-based creates site-specific productions in communities after they spend about 6 to 9 months visiting each place to hear local stories. They go to bars, they go to churches, they host potlucks, and after months of building trust, they write a script with community members about the town, and then they hold auditions. And nobody is turned away. Everybody has a spot in the production. And if you've ever worked in theater, you know how much bonding takes place. These productions are for one weekend only, and they're usually staged on an underutilized asset in the community, not a theater. They've hosted walking theater and biking theater and bird watching theater. And this is an example of paddling theater on the Minnesota River. There was one production that was designed to be a bridge between two communities, and that was This Land Is My Land. And I'm paraphrasing place-based productions here. This was a musical play in the community of Milan, Minnesota, a town steeped in Norwegian culture and folk arts. Over the last 30 years, Milan has had a thriving arts community intermingled with a reduced economy in Main Street. In the last 15 years, half of Milan's population are young Micronesian residents, foretelling a future that is both bright and new. This Land Is My Land involved over 40 locals in the performance of local history, lore, and a few tall tales. So this theater production served to bridge two dominant and parallel cultures, both in the content of the musical, which was full of songs about being new in town, and in the cast interactions. And a great quote from Andrew Gaylord, who's the co-founder of Place-Based Productions, was, "We've never been about trying to make issue-based theater. Where we think we can do something valuable is creating a space for people to come together, tell their stories, celebrate, think creatively, and play together. So at the end of the process, people find that they know their neighbors a lot better. They're talking about the big issues going around, and we're not in control of it. We're just providing the space." Andrew and Ashley keep in touch with the communities that they've worked with over the years, which I think is brilliant. And they've heard about the impacts that have come from all of these productions, the confidence that's developed individually, and the trust that's developed between community members. They've heard about community members who have formed new businesses. They've started music camps and art camps and local bands. They've run for local office. So this may be a really great example about what belonging can do for our communities. It can lead folks to be more creative and empowered in their own lives. So in all this, the how matters. And as an artist, I really can get super caught up in the end result, the tangible painting or the project, the aesthetics. So I don't focus as much on the process. And every time I work with the community, I've found that this is always a mistake. The rush for efficiency, the rush to just get it done, to hire it out, to find the right consultant or the right expert to come in and do it for me. They say that you can be a good role model or a horrible warning. So let me just be a horrible warning for you. In the name of using art and culture and creativity as a strategy to create belonging where you live, I want to run through a quick list of barriers and best practices for you. And I've done all of these wrong, by the way. All right, the first one is beware of your STP. This was an extension acronym that cracked me up when I first heard it. The same 10 people, those just tireless folks who show up at every meeting, who volunteer for every committee, who are in charge of everything in your community. These people are awesome and they need a break, and we need to thank them, and we need to expand our networks beyond them. And most probably everybody on this webinar right now, you're probably an STP. I'm just saying, so am I. Do with and not for. Be deliberate about what you're setting out to do, and know that the folks who you hope to include and engage may have a completely different and better version of your project idea. That's a hard one. So with that idea in mind, be willing to be flexible, relinquish control, super hard for me, and step back. The process and the relationships that you're building are way more important than the final project or the product. Decrease red tape. So each community and every organization has its own idiosyncratic processes. How can these be as clear and simple as possible? Sometimes too much red tape is hard, but sometimes if there's no red tape, if there's no system and there's no process, that is even more challenging, because then it's just people who know somebody. If you know somebody, you can get something done without having a system in place. Invite folks personally. Don't send out a Facebook invite or a blast email or a Facebook post and then scratch your head and wonder why people aren't showing up to things. I've done this lots of times. Face-to-face invites are so meaningful, create a lot of belonging. Identify other local specific barriers to participation. Many people don't show up because of logistical reasons like childcare problems or timing of events or meetings or transportation issues. So it's up to us to sort of identify what those barriers may be and try and solve those. And finally, show up to other people's stuff, right? Support other efforts, go to new events or new organizations once a month in your community and try and be that bridge. And I want to end with a few resources and toolkits. These are things that I've created over the years as I've done lots of weird projects in communities. So yarn bombing, community murals, these are all free PDF downloads that you can find either on the whatsgoodproject.com website. It's under the toolkit tab. These are also available on the ISU, Iowa State Extension store. They're free also downloads, and it'll take you through every step by step, like forming a steering committee and thinking about public permissions for a mural. It'll take you through budget and materials lists and thinking about PR and measuring impacts, all of that stuff. And the POW is a plan of work template. So if you have some really fun, totally off the wall, creative community project idea in mind that there's no toolkit for, this is a fill-outable PDF that will just prompt you with a series of questions to help make sure you're kind of thinking about all of the different facets and things that can go into a large-scale creative community project. The bottom link is a link to a blog that I write every week-ish, although this semester has been a little challenging for that. But I'm going to get back to it soon. And it's whatsgoodproject.com/thoughts. And it's all things related to art and community. I love hearing from folks. So here's my website. If you want to learn more about whatsgoodproject.com, my email address, my handles for Facebook and Instagram on social. And I thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you both Jennifer and Daniel. Daniel, if you want to bring your camera back on and unmute, we do have some questions to share. We've had some questions from the audience as you all have been sharing your great resources with us. And I'll just kind of tag team and go back and forth. Daniel, regarding the community garden, someone wanted to know, do you know if, did the county own the land or did they have to work, did that group work with the building or landowner?
That is part of the great story that I forgot to mention. I was kind of rushing through it. So the mayor was at the EVPS things and he was buying in pretty strongly to what we were going through with the community and some of the ideas they had. And so the town of Connersville ended up purchasing that lot. They transferred the ownership of that lot to Discover Connersville, which is one of the project partners I spoke about. And after that, they just ran with it. And everything you see there is what they've done, what they've made out of it. So it looks great.
Okay.
Good question.
And then we have another question that relates to both of you. So the speaker in the last session, they shared what they see as the differences between asset and capital when you're using community capitals framework. We've been hearing that theme today. And what is your take on the difference between the two? What's the difference between an asset versus a capital if you're using that model?
From my perspective, it's kind of like the economic definition of capital, right? When it's something that you invest, when you put it towards something, it becomes a capital. When you have it, it's something that you just have, but it's not a true capital until it's like invested or put toward an effort.
Jennifer, what about you?
That's a great question that I don't know that I have a good answer to. I always think of the community capitals, which I love, is like a way to organize assets. It's like a model of thinking about how to put them in boxes and think about them holistically. But I agree with Daniel about that reinvestment, right? It builds. If you don't lose it, you lose it, or use it, you lose it with capitals.
Okay, what about, this is for either of you, or both of you, let's say, from your experience, what do you think is the main roadblock to community placemaking? Or maybe you can say, I mean, you can say the main 2 or 3 if just picking one is too difficult.
Let's see. My experience, it is time. Honestly, it's like most of the time it's volunteer efforts, and especially if you're in a small community, you're wearing 17 hats already. And so having that bandwidth and that time to invest, I don't know that it's a lack of love. Most people in small communities are completely invested. It's just trying to figure out how to get more minutes in the day, and how to best sort of delegate all of those roles in a placemaking project.
My simple answer is site control and money. But my answer, it's probably more delicate than that, would be that sometimes it's hard to support the things that are already going well in the community without stepping on toes or without changing like the organic process that's already ongoing through some sort of like formalization. If there's like a community garden that's ongoing, and then maybe a different organization gets involved or the city gets involved, and it ends up becoming something that maybe is not on the original path, if you will. I don't know if that helps, but
we had another question of and this, Daniel, this was for you, but I think I'm going to generalize it and ask both of you, just is for the processes you do where you engage others, do you provide equitable opportunities to gather input for those who are unable to join those initial meetings or experiences? How are you including the voices that sometimes get left out?
One of the it is difficult to get everybody in the room, and we are bound by certain constraints of like time and place sort of issues where a lot of times we get people who are able to come, and transportation issues, as I think Jennifer mentioned, are a barrier as well. But we do have a virtual option a lot of times, and I know that presents its own set of barriers there, but it does help overcome some of the issues. And then we also have a survey that's distributed at public locations and gathered at public locations around the communities. So there's 2 other options that we do aside from the in-person workshops that we do fold back into the process and into the reports and such. But I acknowledge it's a challenge to get broad and inclusive participation, and especially in the rural settings that we work in.
I agree with all of that. It's a huge challenge. Yeah, and we typically in extension, we do those same things, right? You get online surveys, you try and connect virtually and digitally, and you try and be in person. I feel like I try and use art as kind of a magnet, to get people involved in different processes that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable showing up to a focus group, but they would feel comfortable going to a knitting gathering or something. And then you can use that as a strategy to start to facilitate community conversations. But yeah, it's hard. It's always hard.
Well, we thank you so much, both of you, for being here and sharing your perspectives and your information. And we've run out of time for this session, but if you 2 would be willing to just check out the boards and see if there's any other questions relevant, I'm sure that the group would love to hear from you and see what answers you have for that. For those of you who are attending live, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we're going to be back at 4 o'clock for our last session, which is on cross-sector partnerships. So be sure to log out of this session on your agenda and go to log into the next one at 4 o'clock when it's ready. And thank you, Jennifer and Daniel. We really appreciate your presence.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Take care.